What's up? I'm back with another update video. So, as I promised in the previous video, I wanted to get started on making an HTTP server. And the first step to doing that, as I outlined, was that I want to create a TCP server. And I found out the way to do that is you can create a socket, bind it to your computer at a certain port, and then make sure that it's operating with a particular protocol, so the TCP protocol in this instance. So what I did today was I opened up a TCP server by creating a socket with that protocol and then binding it to my device at the 8080 port, and then I began trying to send and receive data from it. So just walking through what I'm doing here. So I'm using the built-in socket library from Python, which lets you create these sockets. Like I think it's some sort of wrapper around operating system commands that already do this. I was just looking through a tutorial real quick on some of the things you can do. So this function gets your computer's name, the host name, and then you can grab the IP from the host name. That's not really being used because right now I'm just starting this server on my computer and then I'm pinging it from my laptop, which is on the same local area network. But basically, to start this server, you call socket.socket, and this accepts a couple of arguments. I'm not sure what file number and proto are for, but the two that I saw that you need to specify are the family and the type. So the family is the IP convention that you're using. So IPv4 or IPv6. I'm just using IPv4, so that's what this constant represents. If you set your family equal to the socket.af underscore inet, that means you're working with the IPv4 system. And then here, to specify that I want this socket to work with the TCP, I almost said TCP protocol, but the P in TCP stands for protocol. To specify that I want this socket to work with TCP, you specify the type, and for TCP, it's socket.sockstring. So first thing we do is we create the socket here, and then as I was saying, you need to bind it to a port on your machine. So one thing I learned is that if I bind it to localhost, right, that means that I'm only able to send or connect to things, or I'm only able to connect to this TCP server from processes on the same machine. But if I want to connect to it from my laptop, I want to set it to 0000 because that listens on all ports for incoming connections. But if it's localhost, you're only listening for incoming connections from the same machine, as I understand it. So we're binding our socket to 0000, so this machine is going to listen on all the ports. Particularly, we're binding it on the port 8080. And then we need to put it in listening mode where it's going to anticipate and process oncoming connections, or incoming connections rather. The backlog, I'm not sure what the backlog means in this case. I just saw that you had to set it. I think if I had to imagine, I think the backlog is probably the number of concurrent requests that it will put in something like a stack or a queue. Uh, Probably a queue, not a stack. I would imagine that you put all these concurrent requests into a queue, and if you exceed that, then maybe it raises some sort of error. But this is how you handle multiple requests at a time when there's some sort of stacking up or backlog. And then for the lifespan of this socket, it's just going to live for the duration of this while true loop. So the socket has this accept method, which you can see here. You take in some input being sent to the socket, and you return a tuple of the socket and the return address. So what that means is basically something hits my socket, and what this accept function is going to return back is a socket object for whatever it was that connected to my socket, and the return address for me to send something back to the client that's hitting my server. So here we're going to have client socket and client address. I haven't written any code to return stuff back to the client address, but obviously I'll do that at some point. Right now, what I'm doing is I'm just taking in, uh, I'm establishing a connection with the client socket here, and then I am receiving data from it. So in this case, I'm receiving a buffer of up to 1024 bytes, and then this is going to be a bytes object, right? So we're receiving up to 1024 bytes. This data variable is a bytes object, and then we're just going to print it. I was having issues when I wrote a script on my laptop to test pinging the TCP server that I'm running with this socket. I think it has to do with Windows Firewall blocking the incoming connection. So for now, I'm just going to test it with a script over here on the same machine. So technically, the connections coming into the TCP server are not coming from a different device. They're coming from the same device, but nevertheless, I just wanted to verify that the server is actually able to receive data. And so that's what I'm going to demonstrate right here. So the first thing that I will do is I'm going to start the server. So you can see the process is running, nothing's happening. This while true loop is executing, it's waiting for something to hit it. So here, let me start another terminal. So this is still waiting. Over here, I'm creating a client. So same thing, it's a socket object where we're using IPv4 and TCP. And then we're going to connect to localhost on that same port we specified, which is 8080. And then we're just going to send bytes for the word test. And then we're going to immediately close up the connection. So let's run this. So this instantly executes, but if we come back to this terminal, we'll see here we got B test, which is exactly what we sent. We sent test in bytes format. And so the TCP server that we just created and are currently running is able to receive data from other processes on the same machine. Next step for me is going to be making sure that it can receive data from other devices on the same network, which is what I'll be testing later, and then eventually responding to them. I know this isn't much right now, but I do not have a whole lot of time to work on this today, and I just wanted to get something up and running to establish the project and just have a starting point to work on in the future. Regardless, this sockets library seems pretty straightforward. Everything revolves around the socket object and functions that you call with it. The pinging script, which I can't show here because it's on my laptop, and also it has my IP address in the script. I guess I could put it in an environment variable so that the code is safe to put on GitHub. Regardless, pinging the TCP server looks like I might need to use async, like async IO, that library. So I'm not very familiar with asynchronous code. Probably something I'll need to research a little bit more, but I think it's very helpful from what I understand for any sort of networking or network tasks. So definitely something I plan to learn and intend to become more competent and comfortable with. But for now, I think the plan for tomorrow, I will probably spend some of my time reading and reviewing my notes on TCP, on HTTP, and on sockets in general. And I'll probably do some reading and review on the socket library, the Python socket library, get a better understanding of what I'm doing here. And then that should set me up to have some more advanced communication when I get back to writing code between this TCP server and other devices, and also start to send some information back to the clients and eventually get into a place where it's able to parse HTTP requests. So yeah, setting up I don't really know whether to call it a server or a socket. I guess the server runs on the socket. That's my understanding, I think the server is kind of like a higher level object in the socket. Maybe that's not true. Correct me if I'm wrong. But the plan, I think, is to become more acquainted with how you set up a TCP server in the first place, and then how you expand its functionality by letting it send, receive data, and then work with protocols like HTTP. But yeah, just a quick little update today. Not much more to talk about, but I'm going to be doing some reading and some research to go deeper on this project, and I should have plenty to talk about in the next video. Have a good one.